Chapter 2. Black Lives Matter. I heard some snowflake Barbie doll spokesperson on Fox News say Black Lives Matter was analogous to the Klan, Kenia said. Doesn't seem like she understands Black Lives Matter, Audrey said. Doesn't seem like she understands the Klan. Audrey, her eyelids shaded with cobalt, focused her gaze on the space beyond the mass of Black Lives Matter's protesters to the stage where the president of the Georgetown African American Student Association, a senior named Brianna Williams, was speaking. Brianna was flanked by other somber-looking Black student leaders. Brianna wore her hair natural, its curls piled up on her head, somehow reminiscent of a flower blooming, which felt appropriate this sunny spring morning. Kenia sipped her tea, taking in the backdrop of cherry trees, their flower blossoms rising in the breeze before settling on the lawn of the campus quad. It would have been idyllic if it were not for the protests. I'm scared, Riri, Kenia said, her lipstick leaving a terracotta smooch on the plastic lid of her green tea. To be a Black woman in the age of Trump is to be scared, Audrey replied. Aren't we supposed to be angry? Oh, that too, Audrey said. There's so many ways to be Black these days. Kenia puffed out her cheeks, letting out a long sigh. Her eyes roved across the protesters. They were mostly students, mostly Black, but there were whites, Asians, and Latinos mixed in, as well as a good showing of professors, administrative staff, and a few bleary-eyed men and women in scrubs from the hospital on the northeast corner of campus. One woman of color had brought her children, who would have otherwise been in school. It's like we've been going backwards. Audrey twisted her mouth and crossed her arms across her lap, leaning forward. There has always been pushback, emancipation, Jim Crow, civil rights, the war on drugs, mass incarceration, Black President Cheeto. Kenia became distracted by a tall Black man, too mature to be a student, moving from one clutch of protesters to the next. His locks were piled beneath a red, yellow, black, and green Rasta hat. He wore an oversized Black Lives Matter t-shirt with stark white lettering, a stuffed duffel bag slung over his left shoulder, and dozens of Black Lives Matter bracelets ringing his forearms like sleeves. He unfolded a "White silence equals consent" shirt to a white nursing student. Kenia recognized her from the Nursing and Health Studies building, but did not know her name. She reached into her JanSport backpack, pulled out a billfold, unfolded a 20, and exchanged it for the shirt. The Rasta man gave her a dab and moved on. His eyes met Kenia's, and he walked over. She smiled briefly, then returned her attention to the speaker to indicate she was not interested in a shirt. He did not pick up on her signal, or rather, he chose not to. Morning, sisters. You interested in a shirt or a bracelet? He asked, with the accompanying gestures of display. No, thank you, Kenia said. How much? Audrey asked. 20. Kenia raised an eyebrow. Audrey made a tsk noise. That's too much. We're just students. At Georgetown, he countered. What's tuition here? 60K? 70? 67, Audrey said. But we're on financial aid, Kenia was quick to add. He waved his arms like a magician, running his hand along his forearm as if stroking an invisible harp. Want to show your solidarity with a bracelet instead, then? Just $5. For 5, right? Kenia asked. 2, but I'll make it 3 for you all. Audrey reached into her bag for her wallet. Kenia stopped her. That's too much. How are you going to support the cause? He asked. I've got the skin God gave me. That shows my solidarity. That just tells me that you support yourself, he said, pulling 1, 2, then 3 bracelets from his arm, then holding them out before Audrey. I need to support my cause of getting through school debt-free, Kenia said. I hear you, he said, slapping the zipper pouch slung diagonally across his chest. A cameraman moved past them, a large number 5 emblazoned on the side of the camera. A smartly dressed Filipina correspondent in a miniskirt, blazer, and heels clicked alongside him. How is it you all got the media to show up to this one? The Rasta man asked. I've been to a lot of these, but the media does not show. You're obviously not a student, Audrey said. Or you'd know. Do I look like a student? He laughed. I'm a businessman. I go where the customers are. If that means showing up at a Blue Lives Matter rally with the blue shirts and blue bracelets, I'm there. You've got to be kidding me, Kenia said. Gotta respect the hustle, Audrey said, handing the man $5 and taking the bracelets. Kenia took another sip of her green tea and decided to put the transaction out of mind. She watched Brianna Williams hand the microphone over to Lawrence Crockett, a black professor from the law school who began to speak about the importance of the student activism and civil disobedience. So what brought all the folks out today? The Rasta man asked again. Some bozo spray-painted the N-word on one of the Black Lives Matter signs in the square here last week, Audrey said. That has made this a bigger story. Some people, the Rasta man said. Yeah, Audrey added, automatically, pulled in by the words of solidarity from Professor Crockett. Well, you ladies stay strong, smart, and beautiful, the Rasta man said, folding the shirts over his arm and floating off into the crowd to hawk his wares. They both wordlessly tuned in as another professor, Yesha Jordan, the only woman of color in the English department, spoke for a few minutes. She was accompanied by Dean Aldrich Xavier, the Dean of Students, who was the picture of whiteness in his gray slacks and blazer, button-down Brooks Brothers shirt and tie. Eventually, Professor Jordan handed the microphone to Dean Xavier. He licked his lips, lifting his arm in an abrupt, aborted wave before he looked down at his feet, unsure exactly how to acknowledge the crowd before he began to speak. Audrey slipped her phone out of her bag, looked at the time and said, We don't have time for this milquetoast. They fell into the flow of students channeled between the Reese Science Building and Arupe Hall. The former, a 50-year-old building with a pea-green tile entryway that stood up well to the latter. An upperclassman dorm with a brick and fieldstone facade accented by a soaring glass tower that provided a well-lit reading and study lounge on every floor. Do you know who Father Arupe was? Kenia asked, noting a white undergraduate girl in the reading lounge, wearing pajama bottoms and staring at the laptop on her legs, her head tilted to the side where she supported it with half-folded fingers. Some white dude from Hispania who came over to commit cultural genocide on the indigenous people of North and South America like so many other Jesuits? The padre was legit, Audrey. He was in Hiroshima when the bomb dropped, survived, tended to the wounded, founded the Jesuit Relief Service in response to the Vietnamese boat people, and went on to work in El Salvador, where he was associated with the founding of liberation theology. Okay, respect, she said, nodding to the dorm and raising her paper cup of coffee as if in salute. But for every Arupe, there was some other repressed, overeducated white dude who beat some indigenous children with a belt for speaking their native tongue. Or raped them. Touché. The tour guides like to remind us here that the clock tower is named after Patrick Healy. He was black and elected president of the university during Reconstruction. Healy's mother was biracial. Brother was passing. Kenya laughed. Probably. Let's not forget the 272 slaves that paid for the Healy clock tower when Father Molody sold them in the 1830s. Right, that's more than awkward. Kenya sighed, stepping around a student walking slowly while he texted. Shifting gears, Kenya, what was that you said about being on fine aid back there? You don't qualify? He didn't need to know that, Kenya said, adjusting the Black Lives Matter bracelet Audrey had given to her so that it was visible among her other bangles. You're either a shrewd negotiator, you learn to be in those Nigerian markets, or you're a bourgeois poser trying to slum it with students on work study like me. Hey, Kenya said, pinching her friend's bare arm. If I recall, this bougie poser paid for your textbooks and meal plan last semester, Kenya said, studying a statuesque South Asian girl with a brushed copper nose ring and a pair of espadrilles that matched her skin tone, and Kenya's, nicely. For which I am grateful, Audrey said, framing a smile with her hands and blowing her a kiss. You are ridiculous, and you love me. One of my many flaws. They walked past the student center, weaving in with the foot traffic bottlenecked alongside the bus stops. They had moved from the section of campus dominated by students to that part in the orbit of the hospital with its own flow of staff, patients, and visitors. They reached St. Mary's, a functional mid-century brick building, with a steel and glass portico added during more recent renovations. They pushed through the glass doors and entered the atrium. It was in this space that the faces of the students and professors became familiar, acquaintances, friends, and mentors. Kenya and Audrey greeted the other women, and few men, since the health sciences and nursing schools were still gender imbalanced, and made their way to the Department of International Health and walked down a hall of faculty offices. They stopped outside a half-open door with postcards from the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Guatemala taped up alongside quotes from Paulo Freire, Frantz Fanon, and Frida Kahlo. Dr. Quintela? Audrey said, peering around the door. Audrey, Kenya, come in. They stepped into the narrow office. The back wall was given over to a window that looked out on a cherry tree in full blossom. A pink pussy hat hung on the coat rack next to the poster that read, "If you are not outraged, you are not paying attention." The walls were lined with textbooks, such as Health Behavior and Health Education, Biostatistics, Educación para la Salud, El Control de las Enfermedades Transmisibles. They were accompanied by paperbacks, worn and creased with use, that sat closer to Dr. Quintela's reach. Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Death Without Weeping, The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, and Infections and Inequalities. How are you ladies this morning? Dr. Quintela asked as they sat down, the trace of an elegant accent in her voice. Originally from Bolivia, her face was distinguished by striking cheekbones, framed this morning by graceful lengths of hair curving to razored points, the rest of her hair pulled back into a bun with a faux pencil hairpin. Honestly? Audrey asked, setting her cup on the professor's desk and her notebook on her knee. Of course. Audrey looked to Kenya and shrugged. In the first class they had ever had with Dr. Quintela, she had shared her experiences, fighting the cholera outbreak in Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. The professor had described her struggle to learn Creole in an emergency shelter while conducting verbal autopsies, her voice trembling with emotion as she recalled the human suffering she had witnessed. Kenya and Audrey had been the first two students at her door come office hours that semester, resumes and writing samples in hand, ready to volunteer as her research assistants. We were at the rally in Red Square, Audrey said, holding up her new bracelets. That's right. I wanted to go. Was it well attended? Yes, Kenya said. Bummer we needed it, though. True, Dr. Quintela said, pursing her lips. There was a shadow of concern in her face that Kenya attributed to something more immediate than Black Lives Matters rallies, but she could not guess what. She did not have to wait long for an explanation. Dr. Quintella rocked forward in her seat. Ladies, I am afraid I have less than encouraging news about the Haiti grant. Kenya's chair creaked as she sat up straighter, the pads of her fingers pressing down on her nail beds. Audrey began to tap her tablet with her pen. Dr. Quintella exhaled. I got an email from Brookings last night. Because of a budget shortfall for the year, they have had to reduce the tranches for some of the grants, including for Haiti. Kenya and Audrey were silent as the news set in, each waiting for Dr. Quintella to continue. Audrey's pen still tapping. The research is still happening, their professor said in a rush, responding to the look on their faces. But I can only send one of you. She paused only a beat before she added, as if to dispel the tension without delay. And I've decided it makes sense for it to be Audrey. Kenya wanted to drop her head down, her chin to her chest, but her mother's voice, always urging poise in the face of setbacks, was stronger in her mind. That makes sense, she said, meeting Dr. Quintella and then Audrey's gazes, one after the other. Audrey speaks French and has picked up Creole more quickly than I have. Kenya, I'm sorry, Audrey said, reaching over the gap between the chairs and touching her arm. I know you are disappointed, Dr. Quintella said. I am, was all Kenya could muster. I don't want to leave you without options for your practicum. However, Dr. Quintella said as if to rally, I am a PI on another study, a pilot for a smartphone app targeted to low-income families in rural settings, helping them to make healthier dietary choices to reduce morbidity and mortality related to diabetes, obesity, and high blood pressure. Chronic disease? Kenya thought. Diseases of affluence? As she let go of visions of working alongside her best friend in Haiti, building solidarity with other members of the African diaspora, and cutting her teeth in one of the most disaster-prone regions of the world, she took a deep breath. Dr. Quintella had projects in Rwanda, Zambia, even Zanzibar. God closes one door and opens another. So, where is the other study? Selah Station, Dr. Quintella said. Selah Station? Is that a township in Joburg? Not exactly. Selah Station, that's in Grenada, right? Audrey said, hope building in her voice. Actually, Dr. Quintella grimaced, this Selah Station is in West Virginia.